Jane Akins, the City of Northport's Community Engagement Coordinator. Welcome to our new podcast, Voices of Northport. In this series, we aim to preserve the living histories that shaped our city's identity by creating an audio archive through the voices of those who lived it. Our guest this week is Elaine Allen-Emrich, a longtime resident and a dedicated community member of Northport. Hi, Elaine.
Hello there.
Thanks for coming on our show today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
So, when did you move to Northport?
I moved here from New Jersey in 1988, and I went to a semester's worth at Lakeland, Florida Southern College, and living in Tampa was outrageous. So I moved to Northport, Florida, where there was 18,000 people. Totally different than Tampa.
Very different. Where in New Jersey?
Tom's River, Manchester.
Oh, okay. I grew up in Mercer County, so around like the Princeton area. So we'd always go like towards the shore through Tom's River, which is awesome. So what was Northport like when you first arrived here?
There was 2-lane highway. There was no McDonald's. There was no Walmart or anything like that. In fact, there wasn't any middle or high school, and there was only, I believe it was Glen Allen Elementary School. So it was kind of desolate. That's probably the best word. Desolate, 16, 17, 18,000 people.
A little different than it is today.
A lot different than it is today.
Can you share one of your favorite memories that you could think of from your early days in Northport? Or
Parades. So this is my start to the community journalism. I walked into the Northport Times at 19 years old and said, "Hey, you guys should give me a job." And they kind of laughed at me and said, "Well, we'll give you an internship." And that consisted of selling ads and reporting, which that doesn't usually happen, but it was the 80s. So I would get to go to community events. And we had at Dallas White Park, the Rotary Club would do the block party after the Kiwanis Club would do the parade. And the parade went down Northport Boulevard. So what's interesting for me is I have people today who walk up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, you introduced yourself to me at the, before the parade started. And I was on a bicycle and you just stopped me and you put my 4-year-old in the paper and now they're 29. And I'm like, "Really? 29, huh?" And so it's in a neat way, we kind of grew up together because I was like 19 as a reporter and now I'm 50-something as a reporter. And even though I don't get to cover Northport as much as I would love to today, I still see the people who now have grandchildren.
I love that. That's so sweet. So how did your role at the Northport Sun shape your understanding of the community?
When you are at a community newspaper, your beat kind of can be many things. So for a long time, I covered the city of Northport, but then I also covered cops and courts. And so that scanner was on my desk. And so, like, for real, when Morgan P. Smith had sent her daughter up north and she was unraveling, I literally took those notes that said, "We'll be in ashes by Monday." Saturday night, she shot and killed somebody on Salford Boulevard. So because of understanding what was going on in a very strange way on a Friday, by the press conference Sunday, I wasn't oblivious to there was some kind of a crisis. That's in the cops and courts world. But when you cover Meals on Wheels, they need volunteers during the summer months. You don't forget about them. You go back in the summer months and you say, "Hey, do you have enough help?" When I very personally ended up joining Kiwanis, really, truly as a way to say thank you to the community, because I didn't have money for books, because as an intern for the newspaper, I just didn't get paid to $90 a week, $5 a photo. I didn't have enough money for books. And Kiwanis, instead of saying, oh, we already did our scholarships, we don't quite do books, they just understood that I was young and I needed help. And so they bought $500 worth of books for me.
Wow.
And so as a Kiwanian, there were commissioners who were part of Kiwanis. They were members. And so they would bring the fire chief in. And now all of a sudden, I'm not just a member, I'm taking notes. The fire department needs 6 new people. And then you develop a real news article out of that. And so it has really made my brain fully work to things like nonprofits, the community in general, the people, the fact that 80% of children at Glen Allen Elementary School are on free or reduced lunch. That's not something a general, resident knows. But as a newspaper reporter, you better know that I know like all those statistics, and those equate to real human beings here in Northport. And so that's what generates the need, is when you know that kids don't have the basic underwear and that this is what they need. I don't think if I were a reporter, I would be able to dig that deep and know the inner workings of what schools need. What, at the time, the police didn't have enough officers. The fire department didn't have decent equipment, and then the nonprofits needed more help. So I would say being a community newspaper, you really are all over the place in a great way. That's how you become well-rounded.
And now you were the president of the Kiwanis Club as well, right? So that's kind of come
Full
full
circle?
circle.
Yeah,
Is there any more you would like to talk about Kiwanis Club, maybe in the past, or how that's evolved in Northport? They're very involved in helping in Northport.
A couple things. One, I don't think people know that the Scout House was built by the Kiwanis Club, and then it was rehabbed by Kiwanis, and that's really important. The children's closet was really because Glen Allen Elementary School had children coming to school in their dad's sneakers. So if you're wearing dad's sneakers and they don't fit and you're not going to gym class and participating because you just don't have a little kid's size, then, a nonprofit can come in and help with that need. And that's really how the Children's Closet started. Was a member of Kiwanis needed a location, and then we were just going to go get those donations. And Zuma Solera, the former social services manager, she was like, all right, I've got, a building for you. And so with that, we collected donations literally for 30 years and gave 5 free outfits out every Thursday, every Saturday. That morphed into school uniforms because new schools opened up and they needed the uniforms. And then it morphed into helping with gowns for girls so that students could get their formal wear and then be able to afford their prom ticket. And so that's like something that has evolved and was amazing for such a long time. One of the fun things, though, because like Kiwanis, we really do fun stuff too, is the fishing tournament. And it's always the day before Father's Day. And it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we have a line. And it's just so amazing. I'm not sure I dug the fact that a turtle came out. They're like, hey, look at the ugliest fish. And I never dig having to do the worms, but I will tell you, when children catch the fish and they get their photo taken, and then they go over to, we have Home Depot is there, and the Northport Arts Center is there. A tatted up dad working right with his daughter, right with his son, spending that quality time. We never see cell phones. And it's just like, it's perfect. And everything is free, including the Culver's ice cream machine. So it was amazing. And that was day before Father's Day, and we've been doing it literally for about 37 years.
That is so amazing. That is so cool. Okay, so going back to newspaper, can you share a memorable or impactful story that you covered as a reporter as it relates to Northport in your career?
I did about 18 articles on Gabby Petito. I did all of the articles on Denise Amber Lee. So we've had some real sad ones. But there are people in this community like Susan Owens, and she is a retired Glen Allen Elementary School teacher. And she's got cancer, and she really struggles. But until the day she dies, she is going to care about students. And I got to write a story about her being like Northport's grandmother. And she really teaches how your child needs to be able to balance and to have the cognitive skills before they can ever read. And she is so passionate about it. And it is, like people say newspapers are dying, they're dinosaurs, nobody reads them. But when you get one or two people that write you back and say, holy cow, I wish that was my grandmother,
Right.
and I learned something. The one thing I know that has been very important in my reporting is always you say, what's in it for the reader? And I will be the first person to say that I break the rules. They're always longer stories than they should be because I love storytelling. I like the person to tell the story. I shouldn't be doing it. They should be doing it. And so you'll see a lot of quotes from me on what that person says. And I will say what's incredible is in 35 years, I haven't gotten the hate and disdain that I know I probably could have. I'm very human, so I absolutely make mistakes, but I do love telling about people in the city. And unfortunately, when you write those heavy-duty stories, the good news is if somebody goes and gets help, if they learn something, or if they want to help someone else, then that's like such a plus, right? Because that's not technically my job. I'm just there to inform, but it's wonderful when you have real results.
Have you had challenges documenting the history and stories through your journalism of Northport?
I would say yes and no. People like Joan Morgan, Lorraine Matthews, they're here. Tony Gustitis, Rhonda Gustitis, they're here. I love telling this story. Northport didn't have a high school. And I remember saying to my husband, Pete, look, you have to watch the babies, and I have to go help fight for a high school. And I remember Tony and Rhonda Gustitis, they got, a bunch of us did this, but they were the ones to hold the petition. And they taped the petitions together, and they walked to the front of the dais all the way to the back of the room. And they were like, look, these are the families in Northport that want a high school. And then I remember like putting on my reporter's hat, and the planner for Sarasota County Schools said, look, Elaine, we don't have enough Northport families here. They're not buying 3-bedroom homes. And I was like, are you really, that's your planning? Because let me be clear, they're living in the garage. There's 2 and 3, what are you not doing that you're not even working with the Northport city planner to ensure that you're planning properly for our schools? And he said, well, Elaine, you guys can have bake sales and you can raise the money for a high school. And, and that fueled this passion to continue to report and report and report until they got a high school. And here's what's crazy. So I would cover these meetings up in Sarasota. They were advisory meetings. And you would hear the capital improvements, right? And so Northport School was like 10th on the list. And they said, well, Englewood Elementary School needs a new gymnasium floor. And I'd raise my hand and I'd say, well, what about the floor that Northport doesn't have? And they would say, well, we kind of need, in Southside, they need, they're in portables. And I would raise my hand and I'd say, there are no portables in Northport. Those kids are on a bus to Venice. And so after a while, it really did, work. And I'm pretty positive I totally didn't answer your question. But,
no, that's great.
But when you're talking about the history, that's what it is. It's Northport's fight. Nothing, like the T-shirts should all say, nothing came easy.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. Like the relationships, the respect, and even the infrastructure, just not as easy as you would think. The parks and recreation, and I'm going there. As a reporter, if something needed to get fixed, I would go over to Butler Park and I would take pictures of jagged pieces of the concession stand, it was a metal thing that was swaying off of the bleachers. There was a tire in the stick, what's it called, water fountain. So if you were in a wheelchair, you couldn't get a drink of water. If you were a child, your eye could be popped out of this. You could swing that metal around and beat the heck out of each other. And this is how Sarasota County maintained our parks. And every single photograph would allow for them to know what needed to be fixed. And so that was how we would get things fixed in this town. The newspaper would, in a way, be there to remind these guys, hey, what about Northport?
We were just collecting materials for the 65th birthday, and I saw a binder of those photos. So now that makes sense on why there is a binder of photos like that. So, how has your family been involved in the community? I think there's a pretty special person that you're related to that's a little involved in Northport.
Well, Pete used to work for the city of Northport. And I will tell you, one of, early on, these guys were sent to Caryville because I think it might have been Hurricane Andrew. So, we had water literally up near our house, and our daughter was not even 1 year old. And this hurricane hits, Andrew hits, and things were crazy, and he got to leave Northport, and I actually got to report about that, them going off to help people. And later on in his career, he became like the landscape supervisor, and then after 20 years, he didn't work for the city, and he didn't work for like 6 months. And one day he comes to me, it was like September, and he says, Elaine, I got this great job. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah, I work now in Walmart in the toy section. And, reporter says to him, so have you ever heard of Black Friday? And he's like,
oh, no.
I'm like, huh, I report this, and it's like the craziest day of the year. So he managed to get himself transferred out of the toy department literally before Black Friday into the bakery and then into produce and managed produce. And the really true, honest story kind of goes like this. He was in his man cave. I think he was listening to something that was going on in city politics. And I was like, so you're going to run, right? And he's like, take a jog with you? And I'm like, no, you're going to run for office, right? And he's like, yeah, I'll honor your wish. And, there was things that truly needed to change. And because of his, his sheer experience, he did budgets, so he knew budgets, and especially the cities. And he knew where you could cut, and he knew what the future was going to hold because of the different discrepancies I had written about. We literally had like 92 police officers, and the city kept growing and growing and growing. And at some point, you have to say it's okay to hire these people. And the fire equipment was like back in the day was like garage sale. You picked up some of these items at a garage sale, and that's what you were dealing with. And we needed to kind of grow up. And so I do believe that by Pete becoming a commissioner, it was a good way for him to be able to logically give back to the community. And then as far as my kids, Cheyenne and Dallas, I dragged them to just about everything. My son, Dallas, I pulled him out of school. He was having a really bad day, and we had to go I had to go take pictures of a fire. And he grabbed the camera out of my hands, walked up to this fire, shot these big, beautiful photos. We went back to the office, and they hired him as an intern. So the
That's
kids
amazing.
have been involved in the city, too.
Can you think of a story about a person in Northport, or it could be multiple people in Northport, that you find inspiring or impactful to the growth of Northport from when you first moved here?
So I would say Joan Morgan, Ed Morgan, there's this whole crew of 90s people, the Vanessa Carasones, the Joe Carasones, who love the city and always are greater good people. With Joan and Buddy Hughes, people, they hated her because it was nonstop. She would not let you forget what we didn't have. And although she got ignored a lot, when they finally thought about it, they're like, why don't we have a sidewalk leading to the pavilion at Dallas White Park? We could put wheelchairs and strollers. Let's do what Buddy's asked for the last year and a half. And so Joan would go to meeting after meeting after meeting and say, the pool's not going to last forever. The pool is broken. The community foundation is having to pay Northport to keep the pool open. And, a lot of times it felt like it was on deaf ears. I mean, look, I wrote the article that said when the high school was being built, if you link up with the city, you could have a pool. And that just went, by the wayside. And so, it is people, even in the nonprofit groups, who aren't willing to let things and programs in this community die just because maybe government couldn't fully tackle it. So there's actually a lot of people who you gotta love because of their love for our city, and they're not the kind of people who want a ton of recognition. They just want it done.
That really was a community of unity from everybody that I've talked to, just all of you working together to get stuff done. Well, thank you, Elaine, for joining us today and for sharing your experiences. Your contributions to our community are invaluable, so just thank you so much. To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Voices of Northport. We look forward to continuing our journey of learning from the local experts of Northport. Until next time.